Hi everyone, welcome to the halftime review. Really excited about tonight's webinar where we're delighted to be joined by Stuart McClarty. Tonight we're going to look at Inside Academy Football. We did put a few of the themes out on social media and in the email which we'll cover, which includes some stuff about the EPPP, Academy Football both in the European game and here in England. But I'm sure Stuart's going to cover that when I hand over. So, Stuart, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Fantastic. What I do want to add in is if people can use the chat function just before we get started. I think George just put a message in there. If you guys can just mention and drop in what level of the game you're coaching at, both men's, women's, girls, boys, and that kind of gives us a background on our audience, and Stuart can then tailor some of the slides in a bit more detail to the level that you're coaching at. Thanks a lot, Stuart.
See what we're at. Yep. Ready to go?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you very much again for all your time this evening. Appreciate both Lloyd and George for letting me talk a little bit about the Academy Football. So before we get started, really, I just want to talk a little bit about what we're going to look at. So a little bit around me, my journey, because I think it's important that you know a little bit about myself and what I'm going to be saying and what I'm going to be talking about. The EPPP, a little bit of a look across the English academies, and in particular around multidisciplinary teams, individual learning plans and games programme. Just a very brief look at some personal beliefs around player development. Lock down what that meant to me and what we've been working on at the club, and then what that might mean to future player development. Some interesting contrast by looking at some of the study visits I've done and looking at some international academies, and then an opportunity to question and answer and challenge me and reflect on what we've looked at. So first thing really is for you as a viewer would be the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. So what I mean by that is what I say isn't gospel, isn't the way it should be done. It's just an idea. It's a way, and my opinion is probably a little bit valid because I've had some time in academy football and I've had a varied experience, so I can talk a little bit about that. But generally, it's a case of a measure of your intelligence, ability to change. So I've changed my philosophy, I've changed my ethos, my way of developing players over the years, and will continue to change and continue to evolve. But what I want you to understand is that don't look at what I say as the best way to do it. It might be just the way at the moment, what you might like. And also don't be too negative with it and just say no straight away. Have a little think about the reasons why I might have said what I've said. And then also a mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it's not open. So it's a perfect sentence there where, look, we have to have an open mind, have an open chance to look at different aspects and to delve a little bit deeper into football and football coaching. So challenge me, ask me questions, and we can have that at the end and talk a little bit more. So another thing that I'd like you to do, and something that would be really valuable for yourselves, would be first thing is write notes. So if you haven't got a pen and paper, go and find a little bit of paper now, have a pen with you and write some notes, because the most valuable way that you can learn something is not always by watching and by doing and just listening. It's sometimes by writing down some important parts. So something that really sticks with you, write it down. And then the important part of all of this is that you find time to reflect. So reflecting might be going back to it 24, 36 hours later. So some of the most powerful ways to reflect is to let things just work away in the brain, but then also to go back over it in a day and a half's time, and then find out what works for you. So there's just a little bit around maybe how that would work with your coaching and how you would reflect back over a session and how you would then move on to the next session topic. Question me and ask me for further detail. So I might go over something quite brief, but it's important that you understand and question me around those aspects and delve a little bit deeper. And then also it's be open to new ideas, but don't action them just yet. So what I have a bad habit of, and I know other people do as well, is that we go, oh, this is a great idea. I could do this next week in my training, or I want to do this straight away. That's all great, but you need to understand, you need to have a thought process, you need to go through things and have a little feeling about it and reflect back on it and whether it's the right thing for you now or not at all, and maybe a little bit down the line. So I've watched lots of webinars like this over the time, but I think it's important that you recognise what you can do now and what you can't do now. So I've seen some things around the pro development phase, which I've not done a huge amount with at post 18 to 21 really, but I've watched some webinars and I've got some notes, but I can't action those because I don't really work that high up just yet. So it takes a bit of time to get some of these things through, but it's about having your own sieve and your own mind that you take through what you need to have, and you decide for what you want to take through to the next step really. And the most important thing is for you, anything that I write in orange today is for you to reflect on. So it's there for you to be curious, for you to think about and to reflect on in your own time. So orange is more directed towards you. Okay. So a little bit about my journey and who I am. So I was a previous academy footballer. I didn't make it into a scholarship. I was a little bit late to the party, so I joined around 11s and 12s, and then moved up to 16s. I spent some time at Peterborough United. My first coach was Dan Ashworth, who was at the FA, who's now at Brighton. I spoke to him a few years back now, and we talked a little bit about his first journey as academy coach and where he's now. He's huge progression for him. But he was my first coach at Peterborough United. Never achieved past semi-professional level, so I got to not a particularly great level, but after being released, I played a little bit of semi-professional. But interestingly, I started and wanted to coach and wanted to referee quite early on. So when I was able to start coaching and refereeing at 14, I started to have a real love of the game and love into doing coaching and refereeing if I felt that football wasn't going to be, as a player, way forward. So at 21, I stopped playing, one because of injuries. So I got a couple of bad injuries along the way, but I also spent some time, I spent more time doing coaching and refereeing than I did playing in the end. So it was a case of I knew where my career was moving towards. I spent some time in physical education in primary schools, working as a PE coach, PE teacher for 5 years. Varied experience with that, and it gave me a lot of understanding around behavioural management, how teachers would look at PE, and the importance of the differentiation within the group was huge at times, and working across different age groups, from the reception children to all the way up to year 6. I spent some time working for Manchester United Soccer Schools. So Manchester United Soccer Schools was a programme which was an international programme worldwide, but also a UK programme which was a residential school for the summer, but also we had road shows across the country. So we'd spend 6 days travelling the country, 2 days in each area. So we might be down to the southwest or up to the north. So I had a varied experience of different cultures across the country as well. So sometimes we went into Ireland and into Scotland and Wales, and then down south and up north, and just the variation of the kids and some really different differentiation in not just about football ability, but them as people as well was very different. I'm now working at Leicester City. I've been there 8 years. So I joined the academy when we were in the Championship, and I've been on a roller coaster ride ever since, with promotion and playoffs and possible relegation, to winning the Premier League and having Champions League, and having some real lows around sort of the club, and then obviously having some real highs as well. So it's been a real mixture across the 8 years. I was an English FA tutor, and have been an FA mentor as well, but just couldn't carry that on due to the amount of time needed with other coaching at Leicester City. So it's tough to try and do that. And the question I'll ask you guys is, how varied has your journey been in football? So a lot of people want to work in my job and work in academy football and want to try and aspire to be the best, but I don't think it's about how much you've done or what your journey started and where you've been, but it's how varied it's been, and how you challenge yourself, and what experiences and what learning have you taken on through that time. some experiences that were linked to that. So I've been able to coach across the UK. I've been in the USA. I spent some time in the USA coaching across different areas of there. I've been to Norway, Denmark, Kenya, Italy, Russia. Bulgaria was another one I've not added on, but there's another one that I've been to. A lot of these were, from footballing, things with Manchester United, different little events there. And then I've also attended tournaments in Europe through Leicester City. So we've taken teams to different areas of Europe and across the countries, and see different types of styles of play and different coaching styles and different players. It's been a varied experience in that sense, across coaching and observing football. Also, alongside some of the things that I've been able to is have access to leading professionals. So obviously, there was times with Leicester City, you're able to watch different coaches, work and maybe have conversations at times at Leicester City. So we're quite lucky in that sense. But also with Manchester United soccer schools, I've been able to go to different places there. So, going to Kenya and having a conversation with Peter Schmeichel, who came with us at the time. Went to Bulgaria with Gary Pallister. So there's some people across these different events that have been really beneficial, and just to tap into some of that knowledge is vital. Obviously, it talks about the primary and secondary school environments and spending some time in those environments and what that means. But then also some non-football experiences, so becoming a dad, having study visits, and then being part of a Premier League ECAS program, so Elite Coach Apprenticeship Scheme, where we do a lot of work for 2 years, and it's a 4-year program, and halfway through that program we have an opportunity to go 24 hours with the military. So these are ex-SAS people who now run a program where you can do some team building and personal development programs, and to spend 24 hours with them and have a gun in my back and on my knees and telling me that I've got to lead a team across the Brecon Beacons in the middle of the night. It was certainly a challenging and difficult environment, and difficult experience to be in, but a very valuable one along the way. So the take home really is, my biggest learning gains have always been taken when I'm out of my comfort zone. So when in Kenya, when there's a cow on the pitch and there's no goals and there's no kit because that's not arrived, and you've got 16 boys who are really keen to listen to you, but they don't speak a word of English. How do you work that one out? How do you start a session knowing that your footballs and your kit is 2 hours away, on its way from the airport, but it's arriving late, and you've got 16 boys looking at you who are ready to learn football? So these experiences are really important for you. And how many times have you got yourself out of your comfort zone with these experiences? And how much are you challenging yourself with that? So just something to sort of really start and understand me a little bit more before we go a little bit further. So a little bit about academy football. And I'm not just going to talk about Leicester City. I'm going to talk about, in general, the clubs that I've observed and worked with, and discussions I've had with other coaches across the way, and give a bit of a broad understanding of some stuff. But it's important that I try and relate this back to grassroots as much as possible, really. So the EPPP, the Elite Player Performance Plan, was put together by the Premier League in 2012. And the big plan was to create a strategy to improve and develop more better and homegrown players. So homegrown players are players that we've developed through the system, who will go on to play into the first team. It meant that there was more funding coming via the clubs and the Premier League. There was more accountability to what your youth program had to have and what the criteria was. There was more staff that were employed, and that included myself. I joined Leicester City 6 weeks before the first audit for the academy. Improved facilities across the board, so people had to upgrade their facilities to stay to a certain level, and then improved player development program. So more of an in-depth look at what program is available and what that would mean for the coaching programs. All clubs were running an academy, follow strict criteria. So most of the 92 clubs, not all, but most of the 92 clubs will have an academy, and they have a reach a categorisation of 1 to 4. So category 1 is the highest. It's a little bit like how schools are sort of judged in academy systems. So in a school system. So expert level, if you like, as an Ofsted would be exceeding expectation, and 1, and 4 would be a lower one. But Some of this depends on income, depends on amount of staff and facilities. So there's a lot of criteria that goes with that. And at the moment, there's 24 Category 1 academies. I know there's a few more that are starting to push towards moving from 3 to 2 and 2 to 1. But as I speak, that's roughly what it is at the moment. And Leicester City are a Category 1. Most of them are Premiership academies with a few a few Championship clubs as well. Okay. So some of the things that we have in the academy, which we're very blessed with, and we're very lucky to have, that is a multidisciplinary team. Sometimes called an interdisciplinary team, but they're very, very similar in the way. But an interdisciplinary team is more about, something inside the club. So this is a bit of a diagram that sort of talks a little bit about what you're seeing. So you've seen the player in the middle here, and the coach is sort of surrounded the player. The areas around, we have sports science, physical trainer. The medical is anything from an injury point of view. Psychology is what it is, but it's not sit on the couch or lay on the couch and talk about these aspects. It's a little bit more about the person. So what communication skills they have, a little bit about their commitment levels, their concentration levels, those sort of things. We have a safeguarding officer, like most grassroots, if not all grassroots clubs would have. We have an education officer who bridges the gap between school and football, and their job is to try and make sure that we fit to their education, and we bridge the gap there, because obviously it's very important with their education. And then performance analysis is cameras, working with and how much they do filming and analysis of the player. So that's what we have as a coaching team, if you like. All these people can have access to the player, and it can be quite a demanding process for the player, because there's so many people that want to talk to them and want to delve into them. But from our point of view as a coach, we're working in a system like this, like most academies would have. Some areas they may not have so much, and there may be some that are not full time, and some will have like a very light touch, and some have a very heavy touch. But we as coaches would sit down with the rest of the team and discuss where we see them. Every week we're discussing the plan for the week, where do they have access to these players. We may notice something at the weekend, and we can then sort of action some things, or we talk about some things that we can do. Sometimes that's the psychologist will talk to me and say, look, these are some of the things that I could do to help the player. Or it might be a direct link from the psychologist to the player. It might be that there's an issue at school with the education officer, and we then have to bring in the parent as well. But generally, these are sort of the aspects that we would be looking at, and then trying to work on work on the player, really. But it's important that I try and not give everything too much at one time to the player. So it's really important that we try and do that. And I've put down the questions for non-academy coaches. So one of the things that you, as in grassroots football generally, would be a case of, you've got to be all of these at different points, and you've got to put a different hat on, and that's a real challenge. And I've done work in grassroots football, and I've been in that environment for 4 or 5 years, where I worked in grassroots football, and I noticed how challenging it can be, because there's so much that you could work on, but you just haven't got the time, or maybe the amount of people around you to help you. So here's a few questions for you to think about, really. So, do you make your sessions multi-outcome? Do you allow for some physical outcomes? So, for example, when you do your warm-up, is it just a straight line jog? Or is it work on agility? Is it working around balance? Is there some coordination in there? Is there some changing of direction? Is there fun element alongside some physical element? Is it all about the football? Is it about trying to work on different stimulus in different ways? Ladders and hurdles are all great, and that's great, but it doesn't work on actions in games, because agility is when it's the context of a ball and where they're moving to, and quick change of direction. Not knowing what your action is ahead of you is probably is more towards agility than not. So just something to think about there around that. And how many times do you talk about supporting skills for footballers? So the 5C model is a model which, if you Googled it and looked at that, it's around psychology, around 5C. So we focus on that in academies, and other academies do as well, and it's part of the English FA as well. So commitment. So how much are they committing to training? How much are they working hard? How many times do you talk about communication? And we just go, oh, you need to talk more. But do you give examples of the detail of how much examples? What are they saying? How are they saying it? How are you working together? Talking around your concentration. How many times do we have to, or I hear it when I was a mentor, around, just doesn't concentrate. So maybe we need to give solutions and ways to try and work through what does concentration look like for that player, and how do we look at. And generally, sometimes that's the goalkeeper who doesn't have a lot to do, and then suddenly has to try and make a save, or it's a player that's on the left-hand side of the pitch who never gets the ball because he doesn't really move, and then the ball's always on the right-hand side of the pitch. So there's lots of different areas, and I won't go through all the 5 C's, but it's just something to think about. Do you really look at some of these things in detail, or do you try and find examples to do that? Or are we quite brief and quite chuck away our comments with these sort of things? And obviously, towards the middle of the youth development phase, so 12s to 16s, you start to notice signs of growth-related injuries. So the 2 real main ones that we have issues with, and I are constantly trying to manage this, is Sever's disease. Sever's is in the heel and the back of the leg. So I'll tell you to Google these and learn about these. If you don't find, you might find these aspects, and people might say, oh, it's an injury, try and play on. But there is ways of managing this, and it's not just about not stopping, it's about managing the way they do it. And obviously Osgood status is quite a common one and a popular one with knees. For boys that are growing and doing quite a lot of sport and being very active, this is something that comes into a lot of play. So it's something to think about if you know about these things. You don't have to a certain extent, treat it and be a physio with it, but just notice the signs of growth-related injury, and then how you can try and apply, how they can try and learn, and how they can do some stretching programs and some other areas that will help ease the pain as they go through these injuries. And then also looking at the way that you develop game understanding of players while they watch football. So it's a perfect example at the moment. We've got lots and lots of football going on every night of the week and every day of the week. We've got some football going on. They've got games with sound, without sound. Now, how much are they actually learning about the game, and what tasks should you give them that could give them the same sort of thing as what we would have in performance analysis? So hopefully I've given you a little bit around some different areas that you can look at there as well. And my final one will be, how many times you talk to them about school, or parents about school? So we have to have this connection that football and school are not different. They are the same, because at the end of the day, we're developing the person. So we have access to that player like they have access to the person, and we need to connect ourselves together and be more aware of it. So if he's messing around at school, well, then we need to make sure that education is a very big part of that, and we need to sort ourselves out and make sure that if he's not doing well at school, then we need to sort that, and maybe he needs to miss out some of his enjoyment around football to make sure that his school's all right. But if we don't know about that, then it's then that's a challenge. Obviously, that's parental issues, but also on the other flip side is, there may be some things that the information you're not giving, he's not learning very well. But there's ways that the school have adopted. It might be a reward chart, or it might be a certain way of learning. He needs an individual attention, and this is the way that they get through to him. If you don't know that, how do you know that then how are you going to work with that player? How can you develop that player? So just something to delve in and then hopefully think about.
Sure. Just a question that's come in there from Darren. He asked, what's the biggest challenge that EPPP has brought to academy football?
The biggest challenge, I would say it's the accountability now. So, which is a challenge in itself, but which is great. But now what that means is there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of thought process, but there's also now a real accountability that we've got to produce players. So we've now gone through this system for 8 years now, going into 9 years, and people are now going to want to start seeing results. Clubs will want to see players moving into first teams. They're putting in more money than they've ever done into into academy systems, into their own academy. So they want to see a reward from that. So I see it coming even more now, where in the next sort of 5 years, we've got to produce players for the country, so for England and for England to develop and be a real strong nation, but also for our teams and for our opportunity to play players in the first team. So that would be the biggest challenge. Is now like, okay, we've backed you with money and staff and facilities. Now we've got to see an end result in that.
Brilliant.
Hope that gives an answer to the question. Next one really was just looking at individual learning. I'm going to try and fly through quite a lot of stuff really, but I just want you to see some of this really. So individual learning plans. So an individual learning plan is something which every academy would need to have. So it's part of the criteria. It will consist of positive and negative areas generally, with possible suggestions or actions that are reviewed over a period of time. Normally it's about 6 weeks, but some academies do it longer than that, which, there's no real set number, if you like, but normally it's around 6 weeks. The individual learning plan can be driven by the coach, it can be driven by the player, it can be driven by both. It's a plan that's put in place for that individual to see what he needs to work on. So everyone can generally work on strengths and weaknesses and knows where they are. So any coach in the world will know some aspects of what they're good at and what other coaches, what other players are not good at. But then it's putting a plan in place and an action in place. Right, what do I need to do? So do we just do generic sessions that just focus on everything, but we don't really help them along the way? Or do we try and help them and build their understanding? The individual learning plan is backed by a lot of research and sort of a lot of support around that players need to know what they need to work on, or they're trying to learn about themselves. There's a lot of understanding around that this is vital for them to try and develop. But the way you do it and how you do it is really, really varied. And I don't think anyone has really nailed it. I think it's really individual to each player, because a standard individual learning plan isn't perfect for every person. Every person needs something a little bit different. But some of the ways that you could action an IELTS, so it's about the action around what you do, really. So individual coaching. So is it that you spend a little bit of time with that player in isolation, you and that player, or you and 2 players on a similar topic? So it might be keep-ups, it might be passing techniques, it might be shooting techniques, it might be some unopposed practice that it's just something that they can build confidence and build themselves in, really. The next challenge is then maybe you do a little bit of integration with that. So it might be that you start to add conditions and challenges. So that's my second point on conditions and challenges from the coach within a games environment. So it's a bit more constraints based for that individual. So it might be, I want you to play less touches or more touches. I want you to be players. I want you to try and take more shots. Whatever it might be a condition challenge that's set by the coach or set with the coach and the player to discuss these areas. And then individual coaching can be on and off the pitch. So off the pitch can be that time where you go, you know what, just that walk back to the changing rooms, or that finish, the finished or the sub, or it might be that little conversation on the pitch where you're walking by and you do that drive-by coaching that people talk about, where you just have a little word in their ear as you're walking by them. Whatever it might be, it's just trying to give them a little bit of a plan or a plan of action of what you as the coach are looking for, because they want to improve and they want to develop, but they want your praise and your encouragement, and they want to know that they're improving on things. They want to be successful. And then obviously feedback conditions and challenges, and it might be that you do some player homework. So it might be some areas that we're looking at that we go, you know what, here are some things that we can really do to work with you on, and try and here's some extra time for you to try and work on that. So what I was conscious of doing is giving you a little bit of an insight into what that might look like for an individual learning plan. So here is an individual learning plan idea. Okay, so this is only an idea. So this is a you, me, and agree template. So what that means is that this is a performance conversation that you can have. Now, a quick disclaimer with this one: possibly wouldn't do this with very, very young children. I don't think it would work very well. But what I would say is that you could create an individual learning plan that plays in the very young ages. So I'm talking sort of 6, 7, 8, maybe even 9, where we don't really give them too much about, we don't really talk to them too much about the individual learning plan, but you push them and guide them towards certain areas. So it might be that you give them certain challenging games or a certain condition that they need to work towards, but you don't really need to talk to them too much about it. They're just trying to guide them towards some of the areas that they may not be as good at. But as they start to get older and they start to get real more confident and more socially confident with you, and you build that more relationship, then it's about making sure they're part of the process. So my way would be to do it like this, which is a you, me, and agree. Some people would get the players to write down their answers before. What are they good at? What they're not good at? So greens and reds. Greens and reds are good things and bad things, or areas to improve on and what their strengths are. I've put down 2 of each, but sometimes I've seen it 3 and 1 or 3 and 3. What I would say with 3 and 3, that's a lot of things to try and work on. So 2 to 4 would probably be working quite well. It's quite a nice number to try and manage across, because you as a coach would try and understand all these actions to try and look at. So you would get the player to try and complete this, whether they do it there and then, or they talk through it with you when you have that chance to talk to them. You as the coach would write down what you feel is their strengths and their areas to improve, and then you would agree what are the 2 big strengths for them and the 2 reds for them, and make them part of the process. So one of the things you might want to look at is ask, offer, ask. So you would ask them how they feel about things and where they're at and what they're doing. You would then offer some of your feedback, and then you would ask and try and agree, because their opinion might be that they think that your answer may be a little bit more better, and you may explain it better, and they go, yeah, actually that means more sense. So it might be they might be generated by saying shooting, and then you might be a little bit more around finishing inside the box. So then, you have to try and agree a certain action, or a certain agreed, these are your 2 greens, these are your 2 reds. And then from that, you then need to create some actions around what are you going to do to work on that. So don't just work on the reds, don't just work on the greens. See if you can try and work on all these aspects. So these actions need to be trackable. So what that means is so your action might be, I'm going to spend 45 minutes a week on my keep-ups. Or it might be, can I reach 50 keep-ups by the end of the month? That's an action that you can track. That's a number, that's a physical amount of time that you can track. If you went, I'm going to try and practice in the garden as much as I can, yeah, that's great, but you could practice that for 10 minutes in one week, and you could do that for 100 minutes in a second week, but they're very different levels. So you need to try and make the actions as trackable as possible for you. And then create that learning environment within sessions and matches. So it's about trying to challenge them in sessions and plan that ahead. Plan your individual learning interactions. Plan those people that you're going to work with. You can't work with everyone. We've tried that. Never a chance. You're never going to do it. But work with a few, 3, 4, maybe 2, whatever you want to work on, whatever your group size. But try and work on a few, and maybe to try and give them some challenges, and plan that into your session, plan that into your time, and give them that, I'm going to work with you today, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to challenge you, but you're going to get better at these things if we work on these things. And I want you to show me your success. I want you to show me your strengths today in this, and this. But also, can you define what success is? So, what baffles me is parents go, every time I score a goal, I'm going to give you a £5. My parents did that when I scored goals, and that's all I wanted to do. So for me, it's about defining success. It can't be this extrinsic, always this goals and money and rewards and whatever it might be, but it needs to be intrinsic. It needs to be, I've worked on something, I'm developing this aspect, and then I've been able to go and do it in a successful way where it's helped the team and it's helped me. So it's about defining what success looks like. And then it's also in sessions, in matches, reminding them what you're trying to get them to do. I remember your individual learning plan, remember what you're looking at. Encourage them when they're doing it, encouraging them when things are tough and things aren't going very well, and then also supporting them when it doesn't go well and they're getting a little bit down about it, because it's a tough process. Learning anything new isn't easy. When we all learned to drive a car, which I hope everyone has mostly learned to drive a car, but when we learned to drive a car, it wasn't easy straight away for some of us, because some of us may have not had that exposure or that time, and some of us passed first time, some of us passed after 5 times. But it's a case of we've got to learn, and we've got to work on those aspects and remind ourselves what we're doing there, and we have to encourage ourselves, and we have to support ourselves when things go wrong, and build ourselves up through that process. Okay, we'll move on to the Academy Games program. So some of you may be involved in academies.
Just a quick one, sorry. With the you may agree, I mean, how do you kind of create that environment where the player's not just going to say, yeah, I'm going to do exactly what, the coach tells me or thinks I should do because, that's what's going to please the coach? So I think in some environments, some players might just decide, well, that's the best thing, regardless of what I think. So how do you kind of stop that from happening in that process?
It's because they're the ones who start the process. So by getting them to start the process, you find out a lot about what they think is the right thing. And it's not about you, it's about me offering, but it's not about me forcing my opinion on them. So generally when you start with maybe a new group in an academy environment, you may know a lot about them, but you may want to start with just the asking and get them to give their opinion and try and people will go through a bit of an identity crisis where they're not really sure who they are and what position they may play in and whatever else. And we're trying to guide them, but it's a case of they've got to come up with their opinions. And you go, you know what, brilliant. You know, I like that. You gone where you're shooting, and your pressing is really good. Okay, great. So they're going to be your two main things. And you go, look, I want you to show us that. And then the reds are always a challenge because they may not say they've got any reds, or they, you know, there's always that challenge. But it's about toing and froing and going, right, you know, what does success look like for you, and progressing and really looking at that relationship. And I think that with time it will improve, and I'm not saying straight away this will work, but it will give you an insight that you may not have had before. And you'll probably get a little bit of parental persuasion in there. So there will be, don't put that down, put this down. If parents, you know, players do it at home.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can delve a little bit deeper, and the more detailed they are around those aspects, the more you can get a bit more of an information around what they're feeling. But it's a bit of a self-reflection for them. And then you've got these actions and these planned actions that you can then try and work on. And it might be that you just stick to the greens for a few weeks, and then you start to push them towards an area. And if they're avoiding their reds as much as possible, then you know what your next action will have to be. It's about really starting to delve a little bit deeper and target that player and work with that player on more of an individual basis. It's about those conversations, and big word there, individual.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be a standard, do this and it'll work. It's going to need a lot of, the analogy I would use is spinning plates. So you've got 4 spinning plates going on. One's wobbling at the end, I need to go over there, but there's one about to fall off. So I need to run over to the other side. I need to work with him and do that. But what you've got to do is be calm, and you've got to be doing it. You've got to be thorough, and you've got to be composed with what you do with your coaching. You can't be rushing here and everywhere and work with everyone. You've got to try and manage what you've got and just do it to the best level you can.
Brilliant.
So a little bit around the games program. So whoever we've got on the call, hopefully this is a bit of an insight for you. But within the foundation phase, 9s to 11s, we have a regional games program. So everyone in the country in category 1 and 2 will play within a region, and 3 or 4 will generally play with each other as well. So what 1 and 2 will do is that, Leicester City would play in the Midlands, would play most of the Birmingham clubs, and you normally go in within an hour and a half each other. So the London clubs will all play with each other, and then your Manchester, Liverpool clubs, and everyone in and around that area will play with each other as well. So it's trying to limit the amount of transport that people have to do, but we do have that time there. We have futsal events that are hosted by the Premier League, and the EFL runs some as well. So we have some futsal events that the clubs are invited to. It's mostly around sort of November to February time is when we do those. There is the odd 1 or 2 player-led days around the foundation phase. So that's an opportunity for kids to be kids and not have the pressure so much of tournament football and play. So it's a bit more around the play aspect. So what that would look like would be to bring 4 teams together, and everyone is mixed into different teams. So Leicester would play with 3 other different club teams. So it might be 2 players from Leicester, 2 players from another team, 2 players from another team, 2 players from another team that mix in, and that will be their team for the day. So it's very play-led, very different, and they would run the teams themselves. The coaches would go and get a cup of tea and watch from the balcony. Generally, that's how limited it would be. So it has some success. It's had some, people quite like it, some people don't, but that's a variety in the program for them. There is an underload and overload festival and tournaments. So the most common one that's done with the Premier League is they play 5 versus 7, then they play 7v5, and then they finish 7v7. So that's like an 8-minute, 3 games of 8 minutes. So they play underloaded for 8 minutes, overloaded for 8, and then they play even numbers for 8. I think there's weighted goals and things like that for the underloaded team, and all sorts of things that they add into that to make it more exciting. But just having that variety and different learning outcomes are interesting for that. And then if you're lucky enough to be in a club that's allowed and able to have an international tours, then great, and be able to go abroad and have those exposures to different places. The youth development phase is very similar. So it's a regional program. So generally 9s to 14s would follow each other. So it would be 9s, 11s, 13s would be away, and the 10s, 12s, and 14s would be at home. So we'd play one club and we'd rotate home and away. Futsal is at under 12s. So the futsal events will go through from under 9s through to 10s, 11s, and 12s. We do have some small-sided events, and most of the regional programs from sort of under 13s up, but definitely it would be mostly 11v11. The small side events, there is a few across the season, especially around the winter program because of the weather and things like that. So that would be 5v5, 6v6 formats where people have an indoor dome and do some things there. We have international tours like them. But then we also have cups with league formats. So there's a big cup under 14s, and then smaller different type ones at 13s and 15s, where it's a Champions League type format where you play teams home and away, and then you move into more of a nationalised league. So there's variety in there. And the biggest thing for me is that it's flexible and it's fun. And that's an important part to look at when we go into the variation across into Europe. But it's very flexible and it's very fun for the players, because most of the program is weighted towards regional games program. But even that in the foundation phase is varied, because each club doesn't have the same amount of players. So some clubs could have 22 players in one age group and some could have 11. So then you're looking at getting either 2 games of different formats, or you're playing a 9v9 with a 5v5, or you're playing 2 6s one week and then 2 7s the following week. So there's very much a variety of program in there.
Stuart,
so,
can I just...
Yes,
yeah,
of course,
please.
mate. Sorry, I'll get in flow and
no, it's great.
jump in. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, perfect. So just on the topic of underload and overload, which is one of the many topics here that can be done at grassroots.
Yeah.
Do you ever do that with age groups to try and blend in playing up and down?
Yeah, so we have the clubs do a lot of play sessions internally. So there might be times in training sessions where you could play the 9s and 10s, or play together and mix those players in. So you could do training games like that. We've done games where we've invited development centres or private academies and played a year above, or in 2 years above sometimes, or grassroots teams, and it's partly a recruitment process for us as a club to try and go through, but also there's other opportunities to challenge our players. So sometimes we've started where it's been 5v7 and gone to 4v7, or it's gone into we're going to play 5 versus 5, but it's going to be our under 9s versus your under 10/11s, whatever it might be. We've done it where in the grassroots game you've got the mercy rule, which obviously is where it gets too high, then they can add extra players in and whatever else. But across the age groups, it's mostly done in training, and players play up, play down. But what we feel sometimes around those aspects is that you want the challenge, but you also want the success. So you've got to give high support and high challenge, but you've also got to give them an opportunity to show their strengths. If we always challenge them and challenge them and challenge them, they never work on their strengths. And I'll give an example. Michael Owen was, and he talked in an interview a few years back, and talking to some of the coaches who were at Liverpool, and what they said were he was able to reach the Premier League because of the amount of goals he scored in his time. And he never really played up or played across different age groups. So he just banged in goals week after week after week, 6, 7 goals. So he learned his trade of scoring goals in different ways and learning how to play. So there has to be a balance. I think playing players up for too long, or playing games all the time playing up is a challenge. I think that's good, but too much can be, you might lose confidence in the player. I think it's on an individual basis. You need to make sure that a player can, cope with that age group and do well in certain, and over time, but I don't think you can add it in throughout the program for too long.
Great, no, thanks very much.
So how do we create an Academy Games program for non-academy players? And all of this is in orange because I think it is important for you to think about as coaches who don't work in academies. So I watched an FA webinar that you can get on the FA Learning YouTube channel. So have a look at that if you haven't seen it already. And they talked about the 3 V's. So volume, variety, and variation. So volume would be how many games are you actually playing. So if I told you academy football generally would play between, foundation phase, we're playing between 40 to 60 games a season. And that's some midweek, some Saturday and Sunday, some just Sunday. So think about that over the season. I'll talk a bit about the international study visits later, but that gives you an idea around volume. So can you create some games, friendlies in the weekends, instead of weekends, or in midweek, whatever it might be. The variety, does it need to always be the same formation or the same format? Can you change up your variety? You know, can you do, instead of playing 6 versus 6, can you play 2 3v3s? You know, what are the pros and what are the cons of doing that? And I can only see a lot of pros in a lot of this stuff because of the individual work that you're going to do with each player. And then the variation would be, okay, we always play 4-3-3. They always play 4-3-3, or they always play 4-4-2. What are we going to do? How can we vary the aspect for us? So if you can play a team and you know what formation they're playing beforehand, and it's a friendly and it doesn't really matter and whatever, so it's a learning game, then right, you're going to play 3-5-2 for half a game. We're going to play 3-5-2 for half a game, but we're going to do it. One does first half, one does second half, and then we'll see if we can exploit you and see the reasons why and see how that works. But it's about the why. Do you have a game plan? Do you have a variation to that game plan, or do we just stick with it all the time? And what does that mean for player development? Now, how can that be added to your program to give you that little bit of change? And you need to know the why. You need to know why you're doing that. So why are you playing 40, 60 games a season? Why? Why are you playing different formats? What do you want to get out of it? You know, is it a technical return? Is it a physical return? Is it just to allow everyone to have lots more game time on the pitch? Is it that you want to play 3-5-2 because you might have that as a backup plan in case you're losing the game? You might need to go 3-5-2, or we want to go into a diamond and play a different formation that no one else plays, and these are the reasons why. Or I just want to give them some tactical understanding around a different formation as they grow older. Whatever it might be, you need to have that why, and then stick to that why and see, and then reflect back on that over time. Can you make training competitive? So I was part of a webinar with Hadrick Split about 3 weeks ago, and the assistant academy manager talked about the Game Cup. Really simple idea, where it was in training, at the end of training, when we have a game, they allocate sort of 20 to 25 minutes of a game towards the end of the session, and they make it a competition. So it's this team versus this team, whatever it might be, 5v5, 6 versus 6. It's the squad they have, whatever it might be, and they go, right, this week, randomised, it's going to be you guys are going to play against this team, just like we normally would. And they keep score and they keep track of who's won the game and who hasn't won the game. So they have a league table, individual league table for each player, and they work out who's in the top and who's in the bottom. And they talk about rewarding the best, or rewarding the players who are at the top. So they reward every 10 weeks. They reward the 3 players who are in the playoff or the promotion zone, if you like. Everyone else knows who's in the relegation zone, but they don't talk about it. And they don't really mention it, but people see the league table, which goes in the change rooms, and they see that. So that real competitive spirit sometimes gets lost in grassroots football because they may not play as much of that, or you've got to get a balance between, you want players to be competitive and have that mentality, so that when you go into tournaments, you have that competitive spirit, but you don't want to overdo that too much maybe with your learning. So it's about having a balance. Can you enter or create your own tournaments? So do you need this big full-on fundraising, big 30, 40, 50 teams at different age groups, whatever tournament? Or can you just run a very small, we've got 2 7-a-side pitches, we're going to bring 4 teams in and we're going to have a little round robin between us, and all our players get more minutes. Whatever it might be, it's just a different way of doing it. But also over that summer, go into different tournaments, have a different variety. Just by playing a different format, generally giving you a real good insight into to different ways of playing, and an exposure to that. That might be abroad in a nice trip if you can fundraise that, and great. But also there's plenty of different tournaments, or even going somewhere a little bit further away from your regional. So don't play the same teams you always play. Go and play an hour and a half away just for the day to go and play different teams, and that will give a different perspective on things straight away. Go indoors in the winter. Try and get indoor football or futsal involved in your program if you can, just to give a variety. And I won't go into the benefits of futsal, but that's something to look at. Can you join up with other age groups at your club? So can you do some, internal games where if you're in a big club, can you play with different, with a different team? Can you mix it? Can you play your 10s and your 11s and mix a team, or can you play 10s versus 11s? That can be really beneficial when you move to a new format. So if you're going into 9v9 and you've got the team above, or the age group above, have just played a whole season of 9v9, having a mixture of some of your players and some of their players, and telling them, right, we want you to learn the game around 9v9, be a real good way of just trying to help your team along the way. But also, if you want to play 11v11 and you want to play different formats, and having 2 different age groups in there is a real beneficial way, and variety of the program again. Session topics in matches. So you know, if you're going to work on, I don't know, pressing, for example, as a topic that you want to work on, or you want to work on trying to win the ball out really quickly, play a match, play a team in a match. So you may want to go through a few things. You might play, right, we're going to do a 20-minute session, and then we're going to go and play a match against a team. And this is what I want you to try and do. Sometimes the biggest motivation for players is a match. So let's put a session topic into a match and see what happens with that. And we do that quite often. We have our own objectives, and you know, the result isn't the number one thing for us. We'd like them to have a performance, and sometimes it's the learning that comes before us in academy football that's more important than anything that we do. So what I didn't mention in academy football is that we are non-competitive a large amount. So those regional games are non-competitive up until you know, all the way from 9s to 16s. Only the tournaments start to come in where it actually matters. Our competitive stuff starts at 18. And then you may want to try and create a level system with your games program. So what that means is could, should, would. So what does that mean? You know, could you win games? Should you win games? Would win games? And trying to have a level system, an A, B, and C. I know quite a few academies have that, where they, you know, challenge their players. You know, if you think it's an easy game, they might challenge them by playing in different positions. So very quickly, because I know I'm rushing, I've got lots more to go really. So some personal beliefs. So these are just some things that people have said to me over time from grassroots football or from other academy football that may not always be the case, or their feelings on it. This is mine. Your dream to become a footballer does not end past under 11. So some people say, well, if you don't get into the foundation phase, that's you done. You're never going to catch up. Not the way. Not the case. There's some really good players like Michael Carrick came into the system at 16 as a striker, and he had a huge career in the game. So it's never going to always be this. You know, that's never going to be the way. For us, it's about building a technical base in younger years, and it's more important than identifying the player's position. So I see, oh, he's a centre-back or he's a striker. Well, he might be, but let's build that technical base of making sure that they can do the passes, they can do the dribbles, they can do the defending, they can do lots of different things. And then as they start to grow older, you'll start to see which strengths come through. Because sometimes the strength you see now isn't about their technical, it's about how physical they are. But actually their technical base will change as they grow older. So it's about making sure that they have a real wide base at that younger end. Relationship between players and coaches is huge, it's vitally important. This will then help with your feedback, will help with the individual learning plan, but also help when you challenge a player and you challenge them a little bit more. So a lot of talk is around high challenge and high support, but you can't be that coach to give high challenge if you don't have that relationship and that feedback opportunity and that opportunity to know that the coach is there for you. And then irrespective of everything else that's going on, you can't neglect the person in all of this, and that's, you know, and that's before the player. So, do you know the person? Do you know what he's about or she's about, and do you know what they're looking into, and what they're all about, and who they are, and what they want to achieve, and aspects like that before you start trying to work with them as a player. So it's very brief and very broad, and we may want to go into a bit more detail around that later. But it's just you know, some personal beliefs that I felt would be useful for us to look at and talk about, and as a bit of a debate. So lockdown. Some of the things that have been happening with myself and into what that means for all of us. So I've seen a lot of academies do these sort of things, and I just want to talk a little bit about that. So live sessions. We've been doing analysis sessions where they've been either watching games and then, you know, giving us some analysis on what they've seen. Technical sessions. So this has all been done over Microsoft Teams or Zoom. Like this is like tonight. Physical sessions. So it's all very much a case of trying to keep them going. We've been doing some quiz sessions, so just the social interaction of it has been great. Because that changing room spirit has been lost, obviously, not being able to see everyone. So just being able to see everyone, have a bit of a laugh and a joke, and just having that opportunity to talk is great, and having a bit of a quiz. I've been an expert on some of the quizzes now. We had Spot the Ball, and we've had check the stadium and work out what the stadium is from a bird's eye view. It's been, you know, and what I didn't realise is how good the lads are on FIFA ratings. I did a quiz on FIFA ratings, and they were outstanding. Couldn't believe how good they were. So, you know, maybe I need to have a word with them about how much time I'm spending on FIFA, but that's separate to that. So, and then some fun challenges. So some of the things we've done, and some of the my colleagues have done as well, are Be the Pundit. So I would challenge them and question them, and they would dress up as a pundit, and they had to then work out, you know, and give me an answer like Alan Shearer or Gary Neville or Jamie Carragher or whatever it is, and they try and mimic them. They had to do like the Martin Tyler be the commentator challenge. So they had to commentate on some Premier League goals that they've seen, and give some real good information, and that just helped their communication skills and their social skills, and it was great, and it was really funny. We had half an hour of all these different lads doing some commentating, and it was brilliant. And Be the Boss was a very simple concept of, I give them a scenario and then they have to create what happens after that using whatever they could at home. So I used my tactics board. It was a left back playing into the striker, and then I went, right, within 6 passes the ball needs to be in the back of the net. How are you gonna, what's going to happen, who's going to create? And then they had to use their own items at home. So some used some spice pots, some used some toilet rolls, some used some crisp packets, some used some post-it notes, whatever it might be, and they went through what would happen. And the striker would play to the winger, then the 10 would join in, and the 8 would join in, and the 7 would come around the back, whatever it might be. But it was a real, very different way of doing it, and very fun and different challenge for them to do. And they'd film themselves and they would send it to me, and we'd do a bit of a chat about it as well. And then some of the younger age groups have done a come down with me, so very much a case about the person. So some have been doing some cooking and learning about themselves and doing some cooking, and then they did the video on that, which was excellent and great to watch them and do some things like that. It's created ownership, it's created player-led opportunities for them. They've had that value of home practice if they haven't been doing it already, and then it's enabled to give us a little bit more of a deeper understanding of them and create a bit more of a relationship where we can be a bit more one-to-one. It's been a bit more open with that. So some really good interactive comments with that. So my challenge and question to all of you on the call now would be, is there a way that we can continue this technology for player development? You might think, yeah, there's some things in there, but when we get back to normality, touch wood, hopefully not too far away now for all of us who are in the UK, what does that look like for grassroots football? And if you think about the venue costs, and think about the travel that costs come with that, the parents' time, the coaches' time, is there a way that we can continue this for player development? And the way I would say it would be, it's additional coaching time. So can we look at, could you do a 45-minute ball mastery session on Zoom, before Zoom start charging or whatever else, or on Skype or whatever it might be, where people, or Facebook video, whatever it might be, that people can access. It's free. The coach doesn't need to leave his garden or his kitchen or his living room, whatever else. Players don't need to leave their room, so parents can get on with what they need to do and leave the parent to, player to do whatever he needs to do. He gets an additional 45 minutes coaching time, and there's no cost. So it's just something to think about and something for you to look at, and maybe think about going into the future, that you could have one contact session and one online session, for example, that might be of use to you as a coach, if times are tight. You don't have to even, and parents don't need to be charged for it. So it's just something to think about with regards to player development and your own time, really. So I'm going to have a quick sip of my drink while we reflect, and if you don't know what they are, they're takeaway companies. So write down now, if you can, if you've got a pen and paper in front of you or on your phone on your notes page, what should be your key takeaways so far. I've only got a short period after this around some study visits, which is going to be throwing a curveball at you, because it's a little bit different to what we may do in the UK. So I just want you to notice some things around that and just have a little moment now just to write your key takeaway down while I have a quick sip. Is there any questions, Lloyd, anything, George, that you would want me to answer right now?
None right now, no. But again, folks, feel free to send in any questions you have, whether it's stuff on screen right now or stuff that has been talked about already, and then we'll get those across for you. And then we'll pick up some more on the way. So.
Okay, hopefully you've wrote some stuff down there, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about my study visit. So I had the opportunity, and I was very lucky to go to 2 study visits. This was part of a Premier League course where I had to go and on my own and arrange some visits to an academy. I was able to go to 2, which was I was very lucky to do that. So I went to Genk in Belgium, and I went to Hamburg in Germany. 2 contrasting academies in 2 different countries, with 2 different budgets, facilities, player development programs. But the whole idea was to learn share ideas, and see what we came from that. So I'm just going to give you some brief insights into this. This was in 2018. So any Genk or Hamburg coaches who've told me it's changed, I apologise, but that's when in 2018. This is what I noticed and what I viewed at that time. So at Genk, we have this facility here. So it's a little bit around the facility. So I don't know if you can see my cursor, but we had the first team area down here behind the stadium. We had our stadium, lovely stadium, very similar. It's about 30, I think it's 25 to 30,000 stadium. That's the view from the main building, which was here, and looking at the stadium. And then you've got the Astro and all the grass pitches behind, and this was the dome, which was next to the first. So everything was on site, and everything with a view to the stadium. Really professional academy. Where Hamburg was a little bit different. They have a facility from under 10s to under 15s. It's a boarding school sort of facilities, boarding rooms there, and some offices for the 10s to 15s coaches. Facility was more of a community-based community, so they used it with some other smaller grassroots teams and hockey sports teams and whatever else. But it was a little bit different in that sense. The pitches weren't particularly great; they were okay, but it was an academy, and it was a very strong academy. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Their main academy has just been the first team to 16s really was fairly new, 2 years old, brand new facility, brand spanking pitches, looking magnificent. The building was fantastic, and it was next to the stadium, so it was in sight of many different things really. So here are some, if you didn't know much about Genk, you may have seen a little bit more because they've just come into the Champions League in the last couple of years a little bit more. Here are just some of the players that have come through the system from Genk. Interestingly, Yuri Tielemans also came from from Genk, but left at 17 to go to Anderlecht. But interestingly, Pratt and Ndidi and Tielemans are all ended up at Leicester City in the midfield. So I don't know if there's anything in that, but it's just an interesting thing to look at. These are the players that have come through their academy and had a chance to be in their academy. Same with Hamburg. They've had a few less, but some big names there that have come through their system. And there'll be some more in the future, I'm sure. So a quick comparison. So at Genk, every team who plays at least one game a week. Under 12s and 14s are playing at least 20 tournaments a season. So just in comparison to the amount of tournaments that we might have, that's probably about, I'd say 60% more than what we would play, I'd guess, from what, looking at academies and how many tournaments we'd have. From under 15s, they've stopped playing tournaments due to they have some leagues, and they also want to try and progress players up the system quicker. So they don't do as many tournaments past 15 as they used to. And then looking at Hamburg across Hammy, they don't officially start teams until 11. So Bayern Munich have followed that program recently. However, they do have sessions, and I've seen some sessions at under 9s and 10s. So they do have players that go into that system early on, but they don't form a team. There's a collection of about 30 players that are constantly evolving and being part of that squad to then eventually pick a certain group to go into 11. Very similar to a pre-academy at 7s and 8s in the academy systems. They have a similar system around 20 tournaments a season for under 11s, which sometimes they play 2 games in one weekend. So half the squad might go to a tournament in Germany, the other half might play at home and play a local team. All of these academies will be playing in a local league as such, but they use the tournaments to really challenge their players. Match minutes are quite an interesting look at. So Belgium, they'll play 5 15s, 3 25s and 2 35s. Formats are very low at the younger end, which is great. I'd fully agree with that. And then at Hamburg, it's a little bit less. To give you a context, in England, most academies will play either two 40s at 11 aside, or 4 20s in foundation, or it'll be 2 20s and 2 15s. So 70 to 80 minutes generally is what would be played across academies in England, really. And formats would be not as low as 2v2, 3v3 in the younger ends. But I know, looking at Germany now, that they would have started a reform of their playing formations, and they're starting to do something similar to Belgium with the numbers and players and the amount of games they would have at that age. So it's definitely changing, and we're definitely looking at that. So some of the key points really to look at. So both academies had high amount of tournament fixtures, as I mentioned. They have set formats for age groups and rarely change. So where we've got that real big flexibility across age groups in the academy system, they're quite rigid with, we're playing 77, we're playing this formation or this amount of time, and that be it. They may get a little bit of change in their formations depending on the tournament that they go to. Session amounts, so looking at sessions now, amounts are similar to English academies, but match timings were a little bit shorter. So to what we're compared to, and maybe in grassroots, that's something to look at as well, where we don't play as much in grassroots football, and maybe we need to look at that later down the line, or what that might look like. Session practice was similar to England. There wasn't a massive difference in what you would see in England to there, but there was a higher percentage of unopposed technical work. There was a lot of unopposed technical work that was part of their programme. Genk more than Hamburg, to be fair, a real high amount on that. But it had a lot of cognitive work towards it. So it wasn't just pass left to right. It was a case of A plays to B, then A goes to where C is, and C then goes to where D is. So there's a lot more context and a little bit more movement involved in it as well. But technical coaches who weren't linked to one age group were real common across all the age groups. So they were probably one of the best coaches in the academy, if not the best coach in the academy, and they would work across all the age groups, and they would work on the technical aspects that they needed, and that would work across all age groups, the young ones all the way through to the old ones. Cultural differences made a big difference in regards to multi-sport. So I didn't know this, but in Belgium, on a Wednesday afternoon, they actually closed the schools. So all children finish on a Wednesday afternoon at lunchtime, and then are invited to go to do a sporting activity, go swimming or go running or do something different. So what Genk do is that they run a multi-sorts program on the afternoon. So children would join, all the players would join the multi-sports program in the afternoon for 3 to 4 hours. And then they'd get picked up after dinner, really. So it was quite a unique system, and it was very, very different, very differently run. All academies had a clear methodology, which isn't also clear in England. So what I would say is a methodology is different to a philosophy. So a method was, this is how we coach, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do across the age group. So it's very clear. When I said, talked to them about, how do you develop play, they talked about methodology a lot, and methodology seemed to be the word that they used more than anything else. Not philosophy, but here's the method. This is what we do in session. This is what we do in matches. This is the type of player we want. And then in English One academies especially had a considerable amount of more staff and wider range. So we had more of the multidisciplinary team, as you saw at the start, but also a considerable amount more staff. So where in Genk and Hamburg, they may be split more part-time coaches, or they'll be doing more more sessions. It was a case of there was more physical trainers, more psychologists, more physios were available. And interestingly enough, most coaches had university degrees. So in Germany and Belgium, they try and hire coaches who had a university degree in something, so most of them were teachers. So in Genk especially, they had most of their coaches who weren't full-time, but they were on 30-hour contracts. So what that meant was that they were working for Genk for 30 hours, but they were also a teacher for 15 to 20 hours a week on being a teacher as well. So they may do some sessions. They may do some sessions in the evening as a coach, but there would be a teacher during the day. So it's a very interesting, different way of looking at things. But they see teacher and university degrees as quite high up on the prerequisite, to join an academy. So that's me. And just before I finish off, really, it's just a case of I've gave you a huge amount of information, and hopefully I've tried to hit you all with something that you can go away with that would be of use to you, or could be of use to you in the future, really. And give you a little bit of an insight into not just English academies, but a little bit around European academies, and also some other things around with that. So the important thing for you now to do is not, that was a lovely webinar, brilliant, yeah, I learned some things here, that was great, and then forget about it in 2 weeks' time. It's actually to use it to benefit you and your context and your club. So what does it mean? So it's the so what, now what analogy that's been used a few times in the past. So what was the information that you learned? So you may want to write this down. So what did you actually learn? What was the information? Well, the information was about academy football in Germany or whatever it might be. So what did you learn about that? So I learned that they play a certain format and certain age groups. So what does that mean for you? How can you what can you do with that information, and what would that be useful for you going forward? And then you can use that, and then it's an opportunity for you to reflect back over it in 24, 36 hours, and then you may want to then mull it over or watch this back. Obviously, this will be on YouTube for you to go back over and look at more detail. But I welcome you to any questions, and I thank you for your time and your commitment to yourselves and to learn something new. And if anyone has any further questions that may not get answered this evening, that use my Twitter and tweet me something, and I'll get back to you, and we can have a chat at any point. I don't mind who it is, and we can discuss. George, back to you.
Brilliant. I mean, first one, I guess I got a quick question just on touched on the lockdown, and in terms of, what are you going to take as an academy away from, some of the things that you've been doing, other things that, you found a real value in continuing, even when things are back to normal?
Yeah, it's let me just stop sharing. Yeah, so it's one of those which we're now in a position where we need to really reflect on what we've what we've done and what we've seen, and we've seen that the new generation of players coming through now are very different to the ones that when we grow up as, I'm talking as a 32-year-old man, but I'm talking about people who may have been, the difference in them now is night and day. So the challenge now for us is to go, right, well, what does that mean for us? We need to look at how we give players more ownership and more opportunities to use video and to talk more and to have that more interaction. And sometimes the most powerful way for them to learn would be by them giving their own opinions and reviewing it back. And the value of just small groups, and I've learned a lot about working in smaller groups and individuals and having those conversations. And the challenge is to find the time to talk to individuals, delve deeper into that when you can within the session, because I'm sure we'll go back to some habits of just, here's a session, here we go, we'll put it on. But the value of the smaller conversations would be really important. And I've asked the same question about, could we do more to do technical, live sessions at home or other sessions at home when things are difficult. So when it gets snowy outside and we have to cancel the session, whatever facility you're in, can you still do stuff? Can you still try and work something out indoors? I don't know. How
did you find the social interaction with the players? Obviously doing the the quizzes and things like that. Obviously it's so different than them being on the pitch, and you can do a fun game to warm up or something, and they can interact that way.
Yeah.
How was that?
They're very adaptable. I thought we would have lots of issues with them trying to log on to the system, and we had all sorts of issues, but they were bang on, they were great. And then it was a case of once they got used to what they had to do and they got over that little bit of shyness around, my face is on a camera and there's a load of lads on there, because some of them were not showing their face and you just see ceilings all the time. We're like, no, come on. You have to nudge them a little bit. But once they saw everyone else was in the same situation, it was great. I think the more issue was them trying to find somewhere where they could concentrate and get away from the family and do what they needed to do. We were conscious of as myself and as clubs, and I'd be careful with all this, is that you probably don't want players to be too far away from parents. You don't want them to go into bedrooms and things like that, especially on video calls. So part of the FA guidance would be to make sure if you are doing anything like that, that you are in a position where you can, other parents can hear, but it's also a quieter area for them to reflect on.
Brilliant.
Just one from me, Stuart, is just going to that ILP, the individual learning plan. Again, really tangible for coaches at any level. In terms of transition of a player between one coach and the next, is there certain things that you found that work? Not only passing on the tack, etc., that four-corner model, but their individual learning plan. Is there ways that you've done it? Is it before they move on to a new coach for the following season?
Yeah, so I think every individual learning plan has been adapted and tweaked and changed, and is important that they buy into it. So whatever you do, you have to work at you have to make sure that they know, that some of them have to, go into it a little bit more detail. We've done it where we've just done little crib sheets, little small like reminders for players, and little small key points that players can learn from. Sometimes that you just have that conversation around, look, I just want you to do this, and or they go, and I go, what's the target you're doing today? And that question is all they need to put it in their heads. Sure. But I think it's that support, and it's that they need to know that they are okay to make those mistakes because it's part of their learning. It's one of the areas, but also then you need to reward and support when they have done it or they've tried to do it. So we always praise and reward effort more than you would praise the actual outcome of it. So even if they score a goal, great. But if they miss the target, you don't not give the praise. You give them the praise of, you've had a go at it. Well done. You've had a shot when you don't shoot. That's the challenge. But I think if you can give a real monitoring focus, I want you to make 5 shots today. I'm not sure when. I don't care when you do them, but you need to make 5 shots today. And I want you to have a go at it, and I want you to have that confidence, because they may get it wrong and they may choose the wrong option. But for me, it's a case of, it's that old saying: if you don't buy a ticket, you're not going to win the lottery type thing. But if they don't they don't step over that line and go into that. But an individual learning plan can be whatever you want it to be, and that You, Me, and Agree was just there to just give them a bit of a context of how you can narrow down towards a target. But then it's how you work with that player. You may go, you know what, I'm going to work with one player for 1 week, and that's all I'm going to do for that one player, and I'm going to really help that player. But the most beneficial way that I've seen it is where you can just have little touches with them across the time. So you just, how are you getting on with that individual? How are you getting on with your keep ups? Or how are you getting on with your targets? You've been doing that practicing at home, and that's all you have to say. That little question, you just keep them ticking over. And I also feel that a parent is also a really valuable part of that as well. If you can make them part of the process and you talk to them about it, look, these are the things we want them to work on. This is how we do it. This is what we'd like you just to remind them and have a chat about it. And that conversation in the car generally is a really important conversation, because it's the last thing that's said before they come out to the pitches and go out and train, or when they finish the game or whatever else. So we have to do a lot of work with parents just to upskill them and give them a more of an awareness of what they need to say or what they could say to stick it in the front of the players' minds.
Great. I think that's a key one, isn't it, about that drive home. But just a kind of add-on question, I guess all coaches on the call would have experienced staying with a team, some moving a team on to the next coach and they stay at the same age group. Yep. What ways have you found like that transition or even transfer of info for the next coach that will take that player?
Yeah, so most clubs have a handover process. So some clubs would, for example, Hajduk Split would, they have a simple system where the coaches would follow a certain route. So the 12s coach would go to 14s, and the 13s coach would go to the 15s, and they have a certain route that they go. So they would see them again along the pathway anyway. But if you have an academy or a system where you just pass them on, it's a handover process. So part of the handover process for me would be to write some notes around, as a review. This is the player. This is what we feel he's been working on. This is what he is. And part of that is we hand over the individual learning plan. So they see, because we review an individual learning plan, like I said, 6 weeks, but we review it at least 3 to 4, 5, maybe 5 times over a season. And if you give the next coach, all of that information, so they see the journey that they've been through, right? This is where they were at the start of that season, and they've now come to here, right? And then you then provide targets from you as a coach to the other coach to say, right, this is what we've worked on. He was a bit of a bugger with this. It took him forever to get used to this, but you need to keep going with this, and this is what worked. So this is the way to try and help him. But you can't be saying to the next coach, this is the way you should coach, but it should be a case of, this is the person, this is what he's about, this is the way that you can find a way into get him to really develop, and this is what a solution for us to find. So it's very simple. My wife's a teacher, so she, the same thing where they sit down, they have a chat about each player. This is what this child, this is what they're looking at, this is what their levels they're at, and this is what we need to do. So there's a real formal sort of handover process. But even naturally that will happen. So, if I'm the under-13s coach, which I was this season, I'd be watching the 12s. I'd be looking at the 12s because if there's an opportunity in half term, there's an under-12s tournament, or there's a 12s game, and I can go and watch it, or there's a session on for the 12s, I'd go and watch it. And hopefully you would have that process where if we do work across 2 age groups, if we do mix in as 2 age groups and we do some of that stuff, you already know the players. You already got an idea what they're about and who they are because you've done some coaching. And that will be part of you know, if there is any coaches here who want to go and do extra sessions or just jump in and observe, that's a great way to go and look at some of these players before you've even started coaching with them. So that would be what I would say would be a good way to look at it.
Great.
Brilliant. Well, Stuart, thank you for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. It's really fascinating insight into academy football and how you can link in these ideas within grassroots. I think that's kind of important to have that transfer between them both. And as we mentioned earlier, we'll upload this to YouTube, so you can watch it back, everyone that's on here. And that is the Halftime Review on there. Also, if you want to follow us on Twitter, it's Halftime Review. And then we also have a website, halftimereview.co.uk. You can find this webinar there and links to our next webinars coming up. Again, Stuart, thank you so much for coming on. Enjoy the Leicester game tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for your time.
Cheers. Thanks a lot, Stuart.